We are sponsored by Young You Organics with this lovely white sage smudge spray, and it has beautiful ingredients. And the ingredients are purified water, white sage essential oil, clary sage, palo santo, lemongrass, rosemary, sea salt, and some blue apatite crystals. And you could use it really in place of any kind of smudging that you would do with smoke, be it Palo Santo or some sage or whatever you would use for smoke. If you don't like the smell of smoke or its lingering effect, and you could use it to bring about a change of pace through your day. If you're having, a difficult day, spray this, connect with its spirit to really bring about relaxation, and you could invoke it to do so. You could spray it on your bed sheets at night and ask it to bring you pleasant dreams. And you could use it sort of like a cologne if you want. I particularly enjoy it that way. And before ceremony, using it to calm and relax my energies. And these are just some ways you could use it. You free your creativity, use it any which way you like. And if you go to the Young You Organics website, which there will be a link in the description of this podcast, where it will bring you to the site, and you can order some and get yourself some white sage smudge spray with this beautiful lion on it. Melissa, got anything to add?
It's a handmade product and it's made by a shamanic practitioner. So all of the um, energies are infused to help benefit the user and all that Nick shared with us in cleansing the space, clearing the space, bringing relaxation, shamanically charged.
Yeah, it's a wonderful product. We highly recommend it.
Yeah, I enjoy it.
Me too. Me too.
Like,
It's a good ritual to bring
yeah, it
it
just
into
brings a
the
little
room.
change, almost like you go into ceremony to change directions. A little bit of smudge spray. It's such a simple act, but it really can kind of just change the nature of your day or the direction that it may be heading in.
Yeah, yeah. And what I like about it too is it like brings about a sensorial type of experience where you get to like spray it. If you spray it on you, you feel like the mist, and then you get the smell of it, and then what that does to your brain. Like there's the shift.
Certainly, it changes everything that you're perceiving.
Yep. So link in the description. Get yourself some and enjoy.
Hello, welcome to Evolving the Conversation. I am Melissa here with Nick and our very special guest today, Hamilton Souther, who is going to do his own introduction.
All right, I'll introduce myself. Hi, my name is Hamilton Souther. I'm a visionary artist, philosopher, and trained master shaman. And I've spent the last 22 years in plant medicine and entrepreneurial endeavors, and excited to be here today.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much,
for joining us.
dear Hamilton.
My pleasure.
And so we're here to talk about the mystery school and plant medicines, the retreat, and everything you got going on with that. So with the mystery school, both Melissa and I are students and participants of the mystery school, and I got to say that it's helped really transform my life for the better, learning about these mystical arts and healing methods and exploration. It's for me, the practice of shamanism in the framework of sanctuary, which I'm sure our viewers will love to hear about it. But I just wanted to mention that it's made it much more fun And it's, for me, it just has made it uh, exponentially better in the sense that, it's I don't have to worry about safety so much, especially going on journeys into these different realms and dimensions and worrying about what spirits I'm gonna come and have interactions with. So just wanted to mention that.
You're
Um,
saying that the sanctuary has made it more fun for you.
yes,
I wasn't sure
yes.
if you were in mystery school.
Well, I was just saying because of that's what the teachings are. So perhaps, Maestro Hamilton, if you could get into the mystery school and what you're teaching there and all of it.
Yeah, we started Blue Morpho Academy to really help people gain the skills they need to be able to navigate the psychedelic renaissance and the plant medicine awakening well. And part of that was to create the mystery school. So we first created certification programs, and the students from those programs said, God, we'd love a way for us to continue our own development and training. And I'd always wanted to do a mystery school. And so it made sense that we could have a community gathering and endeavor around that. And so the mystery school is a month-by-month program that you can come into, and there's a lecture followed by a ceremony every other week. So it goes lecture, ceremony, and we gather via online software like Zoom to both be a community, share in those events, and then we have study circles and community software and Telegram groups and stuff like that that keeps the conversation going and the individual learning going. You mentioned sanctuary, and sanctuary is a fundamental philosophy and framework that's used within the mystery school for the purpose of both giving us a safe way, like you mentioned, safety to explore consciousness and explore the different realms that make up being alive, as well as a way of understanding our direct communion. I think one of the big problems today is that there's a lot of dogma being spread and a lot of false ideologies. And we give you a framework so that you can have your own communion in your own way. And we provide a framework that represents safety for that. So we strip away all of the dogma and really take it back into a universal perspective that we can share and use to navigate these journeys. I think the mystery school is really about navigating the great mystery. And I still don't think there's an answer for it. Like, what is the universe, and where are we really from, and what was before our lives, in this incarnation, and what really is the Earth, and how is the Earth part of a galaxy that's part of trillions of galaxies? Like, how did these things even come about? And I think of the mystery school as going into an understanding of mysticism, which is beyond that of religion and beyond that of science. It's beyond that of the organized spiritualities, and it's really where you meet the great creation of this universe and learn how to navigate that.
Mm. That's so powerful that the mystery school provides the tools for people to really have that direct experience. And in my experience, the ceremonies have been getting like even more powerful, and I'm always kind of blown away. We've also done the online Trinity ceremonies together, which were a couple of years ago, and those were really, I mean, I experienced a lot of transformation over the course of, I guess it was about a year where we did them. But recently with the mystery school ceremonies, I'm just like, holy crap, that's totally bananas that all this happens like via the interface of Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm curious, is that part of your like the practice? I know it started with the medicine world, how like it can be that powerful via the
Yeah.
interface, like when we're not all together.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's some fundamental principles that this is guided by. And the first is that our notion of separation is an illusion, and we're actually connected by everything. And so we have a philosophy of separation. And when you're in that philosophy, it looks like everything's disconnected and disjointed. And when you move to a philosophy of unity or wholeness or connectedness, we can start to affect consciousness in a way that's more powerful, even though we're separated by distance.
Mm.
So yes, there's distance between us. No one's denying that. We're rational about that. But there's a way to recognize that our consciousness is interconnected. There's energy that connects us. There's a great field that is the earth that is the connection. And as we start to go into this universal exploration of our connection, I think it allows us a more powerful ceremonial experience. I also think that because the mystery school is continual, we're seeing the power also coming from the fact that people are doing regular practice.
Mm.
And so when we engage in a regular universal practice, I am witnessing kind of an exponential continuous growth that the majority of the participants are having. And so I think it's both a progressive, linear form of teaching and sharing. So we go week by week through, a natural progression of how to frame the information that we're receiving and then how to apply it into our ceremonies. So I think as we start to apply that information more in our ceremonies, we naturally are going to have a more powerful ceremonial experience and our own personal spiritual practice.
Mm. That's interesting. I didn't realize that it was also kind of like the collective power of everyone's own personal practice, but it makes so much sense.
I think that, in the notion of unity, who we are as people is a much more expanded concept. So we're presented with this idea that we're human beings, we've evolved, and then we get a kind of archetype placed on us. We're a male or a female, or we're gender fluid. We have an age and a bracket associated with our developmental age. We have a job and we're known by our job. We're known by our marital status. We're known by our parental status, et cetera. And it really boxes us in, when at the same time, from a universal perspective, you're made of the universe, you're made of spirit, you're part of something much greater that we could call source or divinity or God or wholeness or the universe itself. And so it really expands upon those definitions. So instead of being boxed in, it's like, yeah, I'm all those things, but I'm also part of this much greater understanding, or this much greater mystery. And as we open up to the greater mystery that we're all a part of, and we start to explore that together, we get this cumulative effect between everybody's up leveling. So as the whole collective up levels together, we all benefit from that as well.
We were talking about sanctuary and the teachings of the mystery school. I was wondering if you could go into the formation and the creation of this type of consciousness technology and how it came about.
Yeah. When we started, we recognized that there was a fundamental problem that we were all facing. And I think we could describe that problem as conflict or dissonance within us. So didn't meet anybody that could say they were 10 out of 10 well in every category, and that they all express some kind of mental discomfort or personal discomfort just being alive. That, it didn't matter where it showed up in their lives. And some people, obviously a lot more than others, experienced that. And so we wanted to address that problem at that time. I wanted to find a solution for why we were all in some form of suffering. And so I recognized a fundamental flaw that we have, which is that we can't fix a problem in our consciousness in the same state of consciousness that we have the problem. Just like you can't fix your mind in the same mind state you have the problem. So like if you're fretting and you try to fix fretting, you never fix it. If you're worrying and you try to fix worrying, it never fixes it. You first have to make a shift. And then once you make that shift, you can address what was the problem. And so I recognized that we needed to make a shift in consciousness, and we use plant medicine ceremonies for that. It's a very specific way we learned down in the Amazon to shift our consciousness. You use a plant medicine ceremony, you go into an altered state. And so I decided that I was going to go into an altered state of consciousness and continue the ceremony until we ultimately had a solution for this problem. So often what happens is you'll go into a plant medicine ceremony, you'll come out of it, you'll go into one, you'll come out of it, you'll integrate over a period of time, but you're never in long enough to be able to solve really big problems. And so I just decided to go in to solve this really big problem. And we didn't have any precedent set for what could happen. We didn't have the solution. There wasn't an ancient teaching that we knew of that had this solution in it, et cetera. And so I organized our team to basically take care of me while I went into this prolonged ceremony. And I was going to come out of the ceremony when I had found a solution. And ultimately, that took over 700 days. And I was in a plant medicine continuous ceremony for that time. and explored both consciousness, human history, and the development of human community and civilization, along with all the different verticals of society that we studied in religion and in science, and ultimately then economics and, you know, kind of the greater world structures we're with now, to try to find this solution. And the ultimate solution that I came up with, I call sanctuary. So sanctuary was this collective solution for this greater problem for us, that if we learned how to create sanctuary instead of creating problems, if we learned how to create sanctuary instead of creating dissonance, if we learned how to create sanctuary instead of creating war, then we could ultimately solve that problem within our consciousness. So first it was, you know, over 700 days in plant medicine to really understand sanctuary and how to be able to create it. And then it has started a multi-year process of testing it and learning how to share it with others.
Wow.
That was intense. 700 days of
Yeah.
plant
Thank you
medicines.
for undergoing all of that. I can't imagine being in a plant medicine ceremony that long, or a
It was a
ceremonial
long time.
state.
It was really intense. I spent a lot of the time, you know, exploring consciousness, and spent a lot of the time exploring the information that we had about the evolution of humans. And it was a kind of like formal execution of what I had learned in anthropology when I was in the university and had studied down here in the Amazon, which was how to really think about not only being human, but studying humans to understand us as a collective and see through the illusions that we've been presented with that keep us separated. So most of the philosophy, ideology, and framing that we give to being alive is how we're different or separated from something else, instead of learning how to see us all as one big group. But when you get down to the species level of understanding, that's what you see, is that we're just all one big group. And then you start to see some really interesting phenomena associated with that. So it's, you know, hard for people to see outside of polarity and binary and duality. And, you know, they see race, they see gender, they see social class, they see social economic status, but to ultimately see us all as unique, individual, miraculous human beings that are all part of truly the same collective, not divided by distance, not divided by nationality, not divided by ideology, nor religion, nor race, nor socioeconomic class, is something very difficult for people to do. And that became a cornerstone of our work, was how to see us all as one great human collective, and how we've been evolving from our common ancestors that, you know, in our archaeological record appear around 1 million years ago.
That's
What I love
amazing.
about the mystery school too is the list of questions of explorations that you get when you join the mystery school. And I enjoy going into ceremony and then exploring those questions of like, what is the truth of our origin as a species? Um, and you know, figuring out when the first lie was told and all of it, really. It's a really interesting exploration too. And the other day, in ceremony, when you were stating the map of how to explore this consciousness, going from the quantum to the subatomic, the atomic, the biological, and going through that, I was exploring what the origin, what the true origin of our nature is, something like that. I have the specific question wrote down, but it's kind of escaping me now. But that's generally like what the gist of it was. And I was seeing Earth life for us as a species, and more than just a species, just mammals and everything that's cellular, just starting from that like one cell and just making everything that is biological. And you were mentioning like really where are we unified in that? I mean, we could say, you know, as far as like this, everything that's cellular on this earth is unified there, and even more so when we get to the quantum of where everything is like that mystery of how we are all connected. and the truth that we really are all connected. You were mentioning too about polarity and seeing the separation and how it's really difficult to see beyond that. I think a lot of that is the conditioning that we're given from such an early age. And I mean, if you're told you're separate your whole life, and I mean, eventually, you're probably going to believe it after a while. And I would say for me, I had this awakening moment when I was in my early 20s, and there's this like saying that like kept going through my head is like no matter how small we are in the universe, we're all one. And it just like really sunk in. And then after that, then I found you and started exploring your teachings and what you have to offer. And it was the same thing. It was moving beyond that dualistic framework of seeing things as separate to really seeing things as whole. And it's been beneficial for my life to, move beyond that struggle in my mind that the duality causes. And so for anyone out there who is not part of the mystery school, I would highly recommend it just to explore those own things if that's what you're interested in, for sure. And Melissa mentioned medicine world, and when you were mentioning that, I got reminded of my first ayahuasca ceremony with you last year in Peru. And I remember sort of like the principles of medicine, of the medicine world, of what we all share, of the universe and time, I am consciousness and movement, motion, state, and being and love. And these are the things that we all share no matter who you are. And I remember in the ayahuasca ceremony, it felt like lightning just go like right down into me. And then I was like repeating like, uh, uh, those tenets of the medicine world. And it was so powerful. It was so incredibly powerful. And I felt like I understood it on a deeper level too with the ayahuasca. I was wondering if you could talk maybe about how medicine world shamanism and sanctuary shamanism are sort of like this like Venn diagram kind of thing. It's, or at least that's the way that I'm perceiving it.
Yeah, the medicine world preceded sanctuary. And when I learned shamanism here in the Amazon, it was presented me in a form of dualistic philosophy. It was that everything's at war and there's a war going on in consciousness and the spirits are at war, and it's found within all our mythologies. And you go into an altered state of consciousness and it was inherently dangerous that you're going to go into this collective state of war and have to go not only survive it, but defend yourself. And I spent many years in that space, and it was very scary and many times dark. And I was looking for a solution for that. Just how could we practice and have a safe practice? How could we ultimately try to solve that inherent greater conflict that was beyond us, not just the dissonance within us, but beyond us as well? And so I embarked on a way to hold space. And I think one of the first concepts of any kind of spiritual practice, trance-based practice, or shamanic practice is how you hold space, like how you show up into the space that you're in and how you start to guide yourself, especially when you go into an altered state or trance state. And so, we had different ways of holding space. There's, you'll hear people build geometric shapes of light. You'll hear of different filters people use, different kinds of guardian spirits they use. And then it gets more complicated in the forms of, different groups or lineages have mesas, which are like greater constructs for providing that protection. And I was seeking a more universal understanding at that time. I wanted to transcend duality. I wanted to get out of this black and white version of the universe and way of thinking and into a more universal way. And so that's where medicine world came from. So medicine world was, how can we just, answer the question, how could we just have a space that's pure medicine? Like just pure light, not light with the dark, not light fighting the dark, just pure light, and you go into that space and you heal, and it's all medicine. Everything in that space is medicine. So it started with universal principles that you described. Universe, time, the I am consciousness, motion, state or interaction, and the infinite state, the divine state, and then our love within our hearts and our choice to choose that if we choose the universal states plus our love, then we enter into a state of consciousness that's fundamentally in a union with the divine and pure medicine. Sanctuary is sort of a advancement on that understanding. So that was really a question. Medicine world was really a question about shamanic practices, altered state practices, but it still left us with this idea of going into the medicine world and coming out, and going into the medicine world when we'd go into practice, and then coming back out of it into the quote unquote real world. And so it didn't have a solution for what we faced within the real world. You could go into a medicine world in your consciousness for shamanism and spiritual practices, but ultimately you would come back to the world that was fraught with all of the greater problems. And so it still created this, going into one state and coming back out of it. Sanctuary was the next advancement, which is to create a state that we don't come out of. We go into this altered state or a new state that is about creating sanctuary, and then dedicating our energy to that, and addressing what would be that dissonance or that conflict as it appears in our life all the time. So instead of, in medicine world, going into it and coming out of it, with sanctuary, we learn how to process energies in real time, like in the now as they're happening, so that we, through balance, what the core principles are: balancing, harmonizing, grounding, reorienting, and healing. As things are happening in our life, we create an ability to filter those energies and relate to those energies or those interactions with other people in a way that is constantly in a process of balancing, grounding, harmonizing, reorienting, and then healing. And so it doesn't matter what's happening. We don't have to go into medicine world and go and fix it. We're creating sanctuary all the time. And then we go into ceremonies to enhance the nature of that practice. And so it really is a practice meant for your daily waking state. It's a 24 hours a day practice. It's a practice that ultimately, very much like Buddhism, can go for your whole life and be a continuous learning practice. And so that's kind of how they overlap and how they're unique.
It's amazing that there's a tool for people that, right, you don't have to be interested in the plant medicine, you don't have to be interested in the shamanism, you don't have to be interested in anything, technically. Just perhaps invoking sanctuary or whatever. You could even take invoking out of it, just thinking about sanctuary and recalling the principles, and it would probably help to, like, right, reorient, balance, harmonize, ground, and heal the separation in the consciousness.
It's a universal principle. The techniques about how we explore creating sanctuary, learning how to create sanctuary, working with sanctuary, is open to all of the different tools that we've been presented with that are effective. Really, we're looking for the effectiveness of our meditations or our yoga or our spiritual practices or our plant medicine practices. We're also looking at how we use intention and how we use focus and how we, deepen our understanding so that we can better create sanctuary. It doesn't require specifically plant medicine or the belief in spirits or shamanism, all those things that are, part of these other traditions. The creating of sanctuary is a choice. You can go into your normal life and create the culture that you were taught, with all of its good and all of its bad, or we can make a choice and make a decision to create something different. And what I choose to create is sanctuary, which ultimately is a place of refuge and a place of peace while we are living our lives, and addressing very rationally and openly the fact that we live conflicted lives. We live in conflicted cultures. We have conflicted politics. We have conflicted families. We have conflicted parents. We have, conflict in our workspace, et cetera. And it's learning how to navigate that with greater grace and greater ability, so that ultimately we're improving our lives all the time. It's very grounded, it's very rational, it's very factual to the lives we have to live. So you think like how you address being in traffic, one is the enculturated way and one way is the sanctuary way. Or how do you deal with a marital dispute? One way is the old way and one way is the sanctuary way. Right? How do you address problems at work? Well, or conflict at work? One way is the old way, the other way is now sanctuary. So sanctuary really does represent that idea of an improvement upon our current culture and a mechanism that helps us just do better in the real things we face day in, day out in our lives.
And I could definitely attest for that too. Just the practicality of it and using it just throughout daily life. It really does bring, I think, more of a cohesion and more peace of mind to what's going on. And, Melissa, you were mentioning like it goes beyond just the shamanism, and you as well, Master Hamilton, anyone can, who's interested can practice it. Sorry, there's like a little bird that just out the window and caught my eye. But just the practicality of it, like being at work and seeing conflict going on all around me and really recognizing the tenets of sanctuary and having me be at peace with being in that environment itself and not being at conflict anymore within myself being in the environment. I know for me, a lot of times in my work history, I would be at conflict with myself just being in that environment, not wanting to be there. And ultimately, that's a really hard way of going about things, just being at war with yourself for needing to be financially alive and secure, and then like being at war with, the overall system and ultimately how unfair it really is for the majority of people. And I could certainly attest for how it switches that consciousness within you. And so you go from one state of consciousness, which is, for lack of a better term, a warring state of consciousness or conflict state of consciousness, to something that's just way more peaceful. And I think it really starts within you first. And then you apply that to everything else and everyone else. And for me, it definitely has helped with conflict resolution and really just peace of mind, which I think everyone deserves.
Yeah, I agree with that. You mentioned this idea of conflict and war and being at war. And the reality is our planet in the form of human is at war. Humans are at war with each other. There's trade wars, there's economic wars, information wars, propaganda wars, AI wars now, conventional warfare, the fear of nuclear warfare. The war has spread in every potential direction, even though most of us don't live in what I would call hotspots, places where it's like right in your face. It's, something else as you hear it in the news or you hear of these other conflicts in other places, and you're given this idea of kind of a greater distance. But when you look at yourself, like you mentioned, people are at war within themselves. And that's where the war moved from being someone else's problem to becoming our own problem. And our cultures are at war, our societies, our communities, our families, and us individually are in that state of war, in that state of fight or flight and in conflict. And we have to decide, for ourselves if we want to live that way. It's a choice and a decision whether we want to live that way. We are all brought up in it, so that's what we learn. We learn that that's normal. But I don't think it is normal. I think it's a sad state that humanity finds itself in a state of such great conflict and such dystopian narratives at this time in our history. We didn't really learn from our past. And the nature of war has been escalating continuously, and it's occurring today. It is right now greater than it was yesterday. It did not go down today. The nature of the conflict has actually increased. And a lot of people act like there's nothing they can do about it. It's out of their hands. But if they look within themselves, they actually do see that there's a place, like you mentioned, inside yourself where you can bring that to an end. And you can learn to start to create peace within yourself, even though the rest of the world is in the state of that conflict. You don't have to adhere to it and you don't have to buy into it. You don't have to participate in it in a direct way, and you don't have to continue to perpetuate it. And so those are all the things that, we learn through the teachings of Sanctuary and the teachings of the Mystery School.
I think it's really powerful that there there is a solution for us, because I think it could be very overwhelming to look at the state of the world or the state of the conflict that seems so much bigger than anything one person could do, that doesn't have, I mean, that I would say, like, I don't have a lot of power or influence in government or politics. So, right, what can I do? What does my opinion matter? But the fact is that, yes, I can actually have a very great contribution to where humanity is moving towards, just by focusing on my own state.
Yeah, and I think your opinion does matter. It matters to you and everyone else who loves you and is near you and hears you and connects with you. And we're taught that our opinion isn't going to affect that greater problem. And it's not in that way that you described, right? And I agree with that. I as well don't have any power over what's going on geopolitically or in that scene or the way media gets distributed, et cetera. But what we have is our ability to converse and share ideas. We have the ability to learn to make a change within ourselves and then share that change with the other people around us. And when I think of something like sanctuary, we can use the nature of our opinion to greatly influence first ourselves. So we always talk about creating sanctuary within ourselves first. We go within and learn how to create it. And that's about how we think and how we treat ourselves, how we recognize ourselves when we look in the mirror, and how we relate to the other people around us that we actually have tremendous influence over. And we start to share with them this more harmonious way of expressing ourselves and knowing ourselves through the core tenets of sanctuary itself. And then I think that we can look at the world and understand that there is a ripple effect that takes place. So as we start to share these ideas with others, they start to understand these ideas and share them as well. And it's okay for something to be a seed when it gets started, right? I was looking outside in my garden today that I planted these baby trees a couple years ago. And I also 20 years ago had a tree that was, a little bit bigger, but not that much bigger. And 20 years later, that tree is now exponentially growing. You look at like the new growth on the tree, and it's a 10,000x bigger than on the baby tree, because the baby tree is so much smaller, right? But the baby tree is growing at exactly the same pace. It's just smaller, and it's just growing and growing and growing. And someday it's going to be that big tree. And that's the nature of this ripple effect that we have, like the branches of the tree. As it continues to grow and grow and grow, the growth of it is actually an exponential form of reach. And so I think that it's important for us to understand when we're doing something that's very new from the core within us, that it's just planting a seed, and that seed could ultimately grow into something very big.
Just gotta water it with love. Love for yourself.
Sanctuary.
Sanctuary.
A
Living.
lot of love for ourselves.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good example, though, because there's so many practices out there about your mind. And I would like to think of what are the practices about our heart. And there's a truth about our heart that's hard for our mind to understand. The truth in our heart is that the heart loves, it doesn't think. And so our heart loves all the time, and we love ourselves all the time from the heart, even though in our mind we flip back and forth between thinking we love ourselves and not thinking we love ourselves, or treating ourselves kindly with our mind or not. And so it's a good point that we can learn to train our mind to the consistency of our heart. So you have a place within you that's just loving all the time. And it loves, loves, loves. Think about when, like with kids, like you love your kids all the time, even though your mind has to deal with the stuff that they're doing that's difficult. But the love doesn't change. You love them all the time, but you got to override that sometimes with some serious mind based on the nature of how we're living. And so when we see that, it's like, oh, I can apply that constant of love to myself. And working with constants is very important to the mystery school and how we train sanctuary. If I know love is always on, it's just love, it's always on, love. My brain, I can start to recognize, likes to flip-flop all the time. And it likes to play what I call shades of gray. So it likes to go from black to white and every shade of gray in between. We get taught to think that way. And then we ultimately learn that we don't believe the thoughts overriding the nature of our love. We know our love is on, even though we think about ourselves in different ways.
Yeah, it reminds me of a teaching from Matt Kahn. He wrote, I always forget the name of the book. I think it's like Whatever Arises, Love That. But his thing is like, you always deserve more love, not less. So, especially when you're feeling bad and wrong. And like when I'm feeling like I want to, you know, step away from the children when they really deserve more love. Like I actually deserve a lot more love in that moment, and that's what helps kind of like diffuse those situations the most, really.
I think a lot of times in life we get stuck in roles, and then we get stuck in how we frame the roles.
Mm.
And then we get stuck in whether we should or should not be doing what we're doing in the framing of those roles.
Yeah.
So we get this role that we never really got trained for. And I think parenthood is a great
Oh
example of
yeah,
it,
totally.
because it happens through a pretty simple action that's really biologically driven that we call sex. And then, so it's like there's this impulse to go there and do it anyway. And then all of a sudden, parenthood comes that seems to have very little to do with how it got started, right? Like, those seem to be like two
Like
completely
totally
separate things.
opposite sides of the coin.
Totally opposite. One is
There's
like
no more sex
frivolous and
than
fun. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, max responsibility drops. And now you're going to deal with that forever, right? Like in a massive way. I think that's where we get to the importance of rites of passage. And
Mm.
rites of passage have been coming up really big for me recently as something that we're trained in, but also something that I think our societies need a lot more of. And ultimately, a rite of passage is something that helps you make that transition. And so I think, it's time for our Western societies to start to embrace the concept of rite of passage, and also with it, the teachings that are necessary to become a knowledgeable person within the nature of that new role. Right. So where's the teaching about how to be a parent that actually is really helpful, not just ideological, and these are all the shoulds and shouldn'ts, but like really what it's like to deal with it and really go through it, and that support network and community around it. And then also something that helps you through that transition. And so, I think that's where rite of passage comes in, and something that we're really focused on now.
Mm. In what way are you focusing on it, and how is it coming up for you?
First, it's just a recognition of the need itself, and then an understanding that when we look at our ancestral tribal societies that had rites of passage, they really have it in just a few very specific ways, like becoming an adult, and transitioning into like the older years, like when you become, crone or sage within the community, et cetera. There are these rites of passage. But for me, I'm thinking it's about recognizing the need for this time of ritual and training in the time of great transition in our lives. And so any one of those changes where we change title, I think is a very important one. Like when you go from young adult to adult, like when like Western society is typically the age of 18, that all of a sudden you're now considered an adult. Like, I think that's a time for a rite of passage. There's before marriage and after marriage. There's before parenthood and after parenthood. And, over 50% of the marriages end in divorce. So there's before divorce and after divorce for those that go through it. There's before great tragedy in your life, which for some comes very young, and some, much later in life. But then there's after having experienced great tragedy. There's also when you're a student and then you graduate into a career and you have to actually now go to work. So I see that there are these like key places, or before great illness and then after great illness. Like, how do I know myself after I've gone through this like true life-changing experience and illness? And I just think it's a time where we can build both plant ceremony, retreat, and ritual around it, where we can bring in something that really helps us understand that we have been through this transition. And then from there, the training that goes on in our life about it, getting subject matter experts to really distill the very best tools and share those tools with each other. One place for me that it was really big, showed up early in my life when I went after I graduated from the university into apprenticeship, and apprenticeship was a rite of passage to then being considered maestro or master shaman. That was maestro médico vegetalista. That was a big transition. But then I recognized later in my life, after I had the hip injury where I broke and dislocated my hip, that the body that I was after that could not do any of the ways that I had learned to be a body up until that injury. And there was no support to say, you have a brand new body and it's because of this big injury and surgery, and you have to relearn how to be a body. Now you're different. And so I would have really appreciated at that point something that would have helped me transition and then learned the skills and techniques how to rebuild myself, not looking back to what my healthier state would have been. And so I think that these are places in our lives where we can build into our ritualistic practices, into mystery school, into our retreats, rite of passage, and something that I'm rolling out for 2025.
That sounds fun. I was certainly affected by not having a rite of passage, especially I don't want to say especially, but as being a female, and like when you start menstruating, it's this thing that's like it's secret, and so you have this like totally natural thing happening in your body, but it's this thing that you have to hide or it's not celebrated. And I feel like that really affects really almost everything moving forward because that's the person that you are. And in our culture, it's kind of, yeah, it's not celebrated or ritualized in any way where you understand what's actually happening and it becomes almost like a source of shame.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Rites of passage through our childhood is really important. And one of them is the movement into puberty. And it's glossed over. It's almost like no one wants to talk about it and deal with it, yet we all express it. You mentioned menstruation, and on the male side of it is when you start to become really sexually charged and
Mm.
testosterone starts to run through your body in a way that it never did before. And it changes how you see, it changes how you think, it changes how you smell, it changes everything in our lives. And I think that that's a perfect example of where in our culture we need to start to bring in rites of passage, remove the shaming, remove this like black box scenario where no one wants to deal with it. And I think it's a fundamental problem in our society right
Mhm.
now, especially in the United States, that we think we can like somehow get away from these inherent factors of life that we find distasteful or we don't like. So I also thought like it was really strange to me that we know for a fact that the process that we call death is going to happen to every loved one we know, or we're going to do it first and we're going to cause that thing to them, right? We will die and then they'll have experienced our death, or we're going to experience their death. And we don't have a way to treat it and deal with it in an open way within our society. And our pets are going to pass on. And most of the pets don't have the lifespan that humans do, and they become part of our families. And so we know we're going to be confronted with this all the time, yet don't have a generalized social solution for it. To me seemed, radically irresponsible and very strange. And so I think that's also a place where we recognize the need for rite of passage. It's like at the beginning of life and all the way through, and ultimately that transition at the end that it seems like so many people are scared of.
Yeah, I guess the fear, right, is a big thing of like, let's just not look at that, go there. And I mean, we've learned it doesn't just go away.
Denial does not seem to end the problem. I was
Yeah.
on a podcast yesterday and I was talking with the guy and I said, beliefs about for or against something have no relevance on whether the thing actually exists. And it's like this situation, like, oh, we're all going to put our heads in the sand and not look at that. It still exists. It's going to happen with your head in the sand, you know? So the same thing that, we have in these great debates around spirituality, like, is there God? Is there not God? The debate is irrelevant to whether God exists. If God exists, God, God being God, while we're having that debate, people debate whether there's spirit or not spirit, same situation. While it's happening, it's irrelevant. If there is spirit, spirit's happening. If there isn't, it's not happening. And it's not relevant to our debate. We cannot turn a blind eye and be in denial ultimately about these phenomena that we experience in our life. And that's why I've gotten so focused now on rites of passage.
I'm glad you mentioned that too, and especially around death. Um, for my first ayahuasca ceremony, I mean, I considered that a rite of passage for me. It took me close to like 10 years actually to get to you. And I remember in the first ceremony, I was seeing all of my passed on pets, all of them that had passed on, just coming in and showering me with love. And then a great uncle who had passed on prior, recently within the year before I had drank ayahuasca. And he came in and he was saying how proud of me he was and to keep going on this journey and just was just like giving me all kinds of love. And you were mentioning rites of passage too, as far as plant medicine goes, and that not being the only one. But I thought to mention and to talk about in Colorado, plant medicines have become legal now for personal possession and for sharing with others with ayahuasca, psilocybin mushrooms, San Pedro, and well, cannabis has been like that for a while now. And so I thought to ask you, you being a leader in this world, where do you foresee this going, and how can this change our culture, and what are the dangers too, and how do we limit the dangers of this? Because the way the law was written, it was um, personal possession of DMT, psilocybin, and mescaline. I've heard extracted forms of DMT can be dangerous. Um, and so I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, historically, these great prohibitions on the plant medicines and on psychedelic substances is something very new and very recent. So it's hard for us to understand the way it was before we were alive. We kind of get a little bit of an understanding of history, but really humans have been coexisting with the plant medicines since humans have been in existence. So first we need to understand that, and to think that humans have, during their great time of exploration of Earth, figuring out what is food, what isn't food, what are medicines, what aren't medicines, what things are purposeful, what aren't, as simple to like garlic being great when you have a cold, and turmeric being great for anti-inflammatory, or aspirin coming from willow bark, etc., like to over 60, 70,000 kinds of known plant medicines. The visionary ones have all been known for a very, very long time, right? And there are living cultures that have used them, that we know have used them for thousands of years and have used them safely. So if we go to the point around safety, the answer to that is really simple. Adopt the safety measures that have been used by the cultures that have used them for thousands of years, and don't step outside of that just because a law changes and people can, think that they can now just use a substance with a kind of collective amnesia that they don't already know how to use it wisely. So first, educate ourselves, build culture, share the understandings that go beyond set and setting to here's mindset, here's a broken down version of it, here's setting, here's how to make a space really safe. And then here's the restrictions that these indigenous cultures and tribal cultures and living cultures that utilize these plants have utilized to really create safety. And we can look at those teachings and think if it really does logically and rationally produce the kind of safety that we're looking for. But there's a known understanding of drug interaction, who's a candidate to use it and who's not, et cetera. So first, be educated, and let's share that education widely. Let's create infographics about it and spread it everywhere. Let's create our own cultural public service announcements and share those with each other, and get the leaders in agreement over what is the real safety measure around the nature of these plants. So, some basics, some very basics is to understand a safe place to be, which also includes making sure that the space is safe in case you fell over, right? So being away from sharp objects and sharp corners that are often in our houses, like real basics, knowing where a bathroom is, having somebody there who's a sitter who isn't under the influence, so that if there's an emergency, they could call for help. And often emergencies aren't because you took medicine, you're having an emergency. It's because something happens and there's an emergency. Like there could be a fire down the street and you need to leave that area, or you could be evacuated. You don't know what's going to happen at a certain period of time. So it's just knowing these like really basics about how to create a space of safety for these kinds of experiences, and then getting into the right mindset about it. Like just because you have a session planned, if you've had a really bad day, maybe it's not the best day to have that session. If you're in a really rough place mentally, you might not be in the right frame of mind to have that session. And then to understand dose associated with it. So all of us in the community say there's a minimum effective dose, and that's where you need to start. And there's these other cultures that start in these ideas of these great breakthrough experiences. Well, that's not where you need to start. And every time you have new plant medicines, the intensity of them is very different. So you always have to start with a new batch of plant medicine back at that minimum effective dose. So you can even understand the intensity and the effects of the plants because they are so varied and diverse in their nature. So first, let's just apply some basic standards to it. I think from there, we're going to ultimately see that it's needed to have these changes. The prohibitions around these medicines are actually not sensical. So if we look at plant medicines that were used as medicines traditionally for thousands of years to be described as a Schedule I substance that has no medicinal benefit whatsoever, means we haven't done the study yet to understand the medicinal benefit. So we need to bring logic and reason back into our understandings, not just a prohibition, because that's ultimately what happened, because that prohibition is now less, lightning. It's changing little by little. And what we can expect in the world is that there's going to be a great renaissance and a great resurgence in the importance of these kinds of substances. And then after that, a great normalization. And what I think is a great example of that is recreational cannabis in the States, in the United States, where it's legal, or cannabis in other countries where it's been ultimately legalized. If you go there, you don't see it everywhere. It's not marketed everywhere. It's not in your face. It's not a big deal. There are more liquor stores and more alcohol branding going on than there is any kind of great externalized expression of culture around this. And the societies have done well to limit the nature of that around publicity and advertisement, et cetera. And so really it's a very personal, very responsible aspect of what people are doing. And we just need to continue to promote that.
Beautiful. I hope one day to see that there is some kind of facilitation center where you have masterful facilitators and sitters working right alongside medical doctors and really,
It'll
really evolve.
happen. It'll happen. Down here in Peru, there was a great expansion of the understandings, and the science hasn't been done yet to fully be able to import these knowledges into our ministries of health and our globalized medical system, but it's coming little by little. And one of the things that happened here was the Ministry of Health accepted the validity of traditional practices post-treatment. So you could go for a Western medical treatment and then actually choose if you wanted a healer to continue your post-treatment medical experience, and that they were working in concert with the Western hospitals.
I think that's so important.
And it's part of evolution. It's a little by little thing. That's the nature of how our big systems evolve. And we also have to understand that at the time that our science was formed, two really big things were happening. One, there were a lot of false beliefs and a lot of charlatanism and a lot of things going on that needed to be cleaned up. And the second piece was there was a lot of politicking and agenda going on. And so both of those things ultimately skewed a more rational, logical view of really what was needed for society. And now that a majority of that cleanup has happened, and we're seeing through certain levels of agenda, and the people are coming together once again and uniting and helping change legislation in the favor of a more open understanding about the importance that these substances and plant medicines can have in our lives.
Well spoken. I am all for it. Plant medicine is something that I'm so passionate about. It just like lights up my world. I love it. And the shamanic practice, even inside, outside the plant medicines, is just what I'm truly passionate about. And I just wanted to thank you for coming on today. We got to the hour mark and sharing your wealth of knowledge and teaching me many good teachings, all good teachings over the past year. So thank you very much for all of that. And there will be a link for anyone who is interested in the mystery school and the ayahuasca retreats. that you can go on. Uh, Definitely recommend it. 10 out of 10. Get on it. Melissa, got anything to add?
Oh, well, Blue Morpho is also hosting San Pedro retreats, right? And combination ayahuasca and San Pedro retreats. You also have the Blue Morpho Academy where you're certifying sitters, if you'd like to talk about any of that.
Sure. Just, Blue Morpho, as Melissa just said, offers ayahuasca and San Pedro retreats down here in Peru, in the home of where the plants grow naturally and are part of the culture. And we've been doing this for over 20 years. And so if you would like to come on one of our retreats, come to bluemorphotours.com and you can see the different offerings that we have. It's going to be an exciting year coming up with retreats in the Amazon and outside of Cusco in the Sacred Valley in the Andes, which are both beautiful places to come to. And we also have Blue Morpho Academy, which has our certification programs for sitters, coaches, facilitators, and master facilitators in the plant medicine movement, as well as our mystery school that we talked about.
You're busy. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. It's been a pleasure today. Adios.
Bye.